Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the recording guitar panel. We've got an all-star lineup up here, these guys. What I love about coming to Nashville is that there's a ton of talent in town, and they're willing to come down here and talk to us and, you know, give us their experiences and that kind of thing. So I just got to ask first, how many guitar players? Okay. And how many are recording guitar at home? Yeah, that's pretty much everybody. Okay. Just a couple quick things. One is that, is anybody Twittering? Okay, so this is an experiment. So underneath my name there, if you Twitter that with that at the end of your tweet, you can Twitter a question and I'll see it here. And we can do it, you know, the traditional way or the new way. So either way.
So if you're ashamed of your question, that's...
Yeah, right, exactly. And I can filter, too, so. So I'm just going to do a brief intro of these guys. Starting on my left is Brent Milligan. Came to Nashville from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. LSU grad, so you were very happy the other night, I'm sure.
I was there.
He was there, yep. He's Grammy-nominated record producer, session musician. His credits, I went up on allmusic.com, and it was like, you do a lot of stuff, man. It's very impressive. So I was seeing credits for bass, guitar playing, producing, engineer, keyboards, programmer, arranger, that kind of thing. So multi-talented guy. He's worked with DC Talk, Jackie Velasquez, David Crowder, Spooky Tuesday, and Rebecca St. James. So. Next is Russ Long, who I've known for years. Russ has been kind enough to write for me from time to time on various magazines I've been involved with. He's got a review in last month's mix of the Audio-Technica ribbon mics that was very cool. Russ has worked with Rich Mullins, Sixpence None the Richer, Carolyn Aaron's One, and Reliant K. And Russ is a very talented individual in that he not only records music, but he works with a band and develops talent and that kind of thing too. Next is Shane Wilson, and Shane is he's worked with Switchfoot, Third Day, Mercy Me, Owsley, David Crowder Band, and Big Kenny. He's also got this very cool looking DVD set that I found online. It's called Shane Wilson's Guide to Mixing. That looked very nice. Where you take people through like a three-hour mix. Yeah. So it looked very, very, very interesting. So that's worth checking out. And last but not least is Chuck Ainlay down at the end there. Chuck just did the Nuendo Masterclass. I don't know if you guys were in for that, but it's always nice to see what a guy like Chuck is doing with the gear he has. So he's nice enough to bring his gear down here. And his list of credits is really quite the list. Chuck's been doing it for 28 or 9 years. Shh. And, you know, we've got a great lineup here. So what we're going to tackle today is we're going to get into mic choices, placement, how to record an amp, acoustic guitar recording, dealing with leakage in the studio, recording vocals, and guitar at the same time, and those kind of issues. And if you guys have any questions as we go along, please chime in or tweet them to that address right there, and we'll get to them as many as we can. So I wanted to start with kind of to get to know how the guys treat individual situations, because recording guitar is often a moving target, in that, you know, there's certain things you can do as far as mic placement and, you know, X, Y, and 3-to-1 rule and that kind of thing. But there's always that one special situation where, you know, something comes up where you have to be thinking on your feet and go with something that's maybe a little out of the ordinary or maybe not. But let's just start with Brent here, who actually had a very interesting story. So do you have any memorable specialized guitar recording situations?
I think the one that sticks out most is, you don't need to move that.
Miking with the SM58.
Yeah, mic placement. I don't work with 58s, so. One time I was in the studio, and it was a pretty small studio, and we ran out of space, and the guitar player had to, you know, the amp was on 10, that was its sound. And so we were totally out of space, and he was going to blow somebody's head off with that thing. And so we took his cabinet and went and put it out in my Jeep and just mic'd it up in my Jeep because it was like, you know, major isolation, right? Out in a car outside. So, yeah, so we did that.
Well, don't think I can top that. I generally, when I record electric guitar, I'm generally a one mic guy, but occasionally I'll experiment with multiple mics, and I can remember one occasion where we had a couple different amps running, and one was a real small little stomp box, Boss amp that was built into a little stomp box, and then we had a full Vox AC30, and we ended up wiring the signal going to both of those amps, which were in different rooms, and I also mic'd the actual strings on an electric guitar, and throughout the song we kind of morphed the sound from one to another, and in the intro it started with just the strings strumming on the guitar, and then we slowly brought up the little pedal amp, and then the Vox came in on the choruses, but then faded back out on the verses, and it was created a pretty cool texture that was all the same performance, but it was a combination of a bunch of totally different different sounds, which I thought was pretty cool.
I can't top either of those, except to say that I did get to record Nugent one time.
So I've got nothing to say.
Liar.
You cannot top that. Well, I'll throw out a name. So you guys probably know I work with Mark Knopfler and I've been working with him for a long time, but we always used to record at Air Studios or here or whatever. But when we go back to England to save money, he had this little Muse home, which is a little like sort of carriage home where behind the mansion house where they, you know, the people that looked after the horses and the carriages. Anyhow, he had one of those, and they're worth millions now, but the little bedroom was the room where we'd always record his electric guitars and acoustic guitars and vocals and stuff as we were doing overdubs. So when he built his new studio in Chiswick and spent millions of pounds on this new studio, he'd said, well, I want to have a room built that's just like my bedroom at the Muse house. So that, you know, just to say for all you who are recording at home, you can do it in your bedroom.
Nice. So let's get into signal chain a little bit. So do you guys have any kind of mic and preamp combination, maybe going with some processor, you know, directly making that decision on the fly rather than wait until later, that kind of thing? Special mic, you know, choices off the bat for an amp?
57. It's like the automatic go-to microphone for me. Probably, I'll bet everybody who's ever recorded a guitar, that's at least where you start.
I think, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I almost always go to a 57. But I love that Royer tube mic, you know, that 121. It's like a ribbon with a tube in it. Russ has one,
122B,
too. And, man, it's stout on electric. I mean, it's different than a 57, but I don't know. It's just one of those, you know, there's just a couple of mics really on electric where you push it up and you go, yeah. And it's just one of those. So I think I mean, I used to, gosh, for years, I don't think I put any other mic on a guitar amp than a 57, but I'll put the Royer on there a good bit of the time, you know, and I mean, sometimes if the 57's really, you know, giving you that bite or something, then maybe I'll do choruses with that and do verses with the Royer to kind of, you know, change gears a little bit or something like that, but I can't get over that mic. And then there's this other mic called, you know, Cascade mics that makes those fat heads? Well, they send me these emails where it's like, hey, this week we're blowing this mic out for, you know, $150. Yeah, I mean, something crazy like that. So one week they send this email, and it's this RCA 77 looking thing called a Venjet. And it was like $199. And I don't know what kind of mood I was in, but I was like, for $199? I mean, I'll buy just about any ribbon mic for $199. So I bought it and got it, and it probably sat there in its case for 3 months. And then one day, I just got it out and put it on this old airline combo amp that I have, and it was like lightning struck, you know. So that's kind of my third. I'd probably use it 10% of the time or something. But it's a fun kind of diversion.
I usually use the Royer 122 is my go-to guitar mic, and but I use anything. 421s or 57s, but I would say probably 80% of the time it's a 122.
Any special preamps you guys like to go to?
I love the Chandler channel quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. And, anything Neve-ish, whether it's an actual Neve 10 series or the Aurora GTQ2, 1272.
I love the Chandler Germanium, the little blue 500 Chandler Germanium. That's my favorite guitar preamp.
For me, it's generally, I generally put a 57 kind of off axis on the speaker cone pointing in towards the dust cover. And then I usually have a 121. I prefer the 121 to the 122s because not using the preamp, you can't overdrive it, and or overdrive the preamp because the 122s can be a bit hot coming into your pre. If I have APIs for electric guitar, I think the API preamp just like has that nose that's like just really makes them speak. Neves are nice and silky and warm and everything. But the Chandler stuff's really cool. It's basically a copy of the old EMI red console. And yeah, they're cool for that sort of honky-ish thing. But 50s, and then a lot of times I'll use a U67 instead of the Royer to have a warmer, fatter sound, and generally use room mics as well to kind of build the sound out, because I think that close mic thing's pretty sterile. It's great if you really want to accent a track and stick it wide and have that guitar really speak from the side, but the room mic can kind of help fill out the guitar and make it sound like it belongs in the track.
That's one of the things I love about the Royers is because they, since they're bidirectional, if you move it a little away from the amp, you're also picking up a fair amount of room as well. So if you've got a nice sounding room, you can capture that as well as capturing the close mic signal.
Do you ever try flipping the Royer around?
Yeah, to get a little brighter.
If you don't know, the back side of a Royer is generally a little brighter than the front side. So if you flip it around, flip this phase, obviously, and get a little different sound.
Do you guys, when you're doing multi-miking, do you commit the sound to one track?
No.
Yeah, I usually don't either.
I hate to say that because I do really like the idea of committing, but with an ambient mic, I'd like to leave it separate.
With an ambient mic, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
because you just don't know exactly how it's going to fit in the track, and I like to kind of spread the couple of different mics that I have close sometimes. Sometimes I lay them right on top of each other. Sometimes I spread them out a little bit, and it's a totally different feel in the mix. And even though they kind of add up to be the same thing, it just makes the guitar sit in a different way.
I guess
You're wrong.
I'm wrong because I commit.
Well, yeah, I'm totally with you, man.
No,
I commit on most things.
Since I mostly mix.
Yeah.
For instance, I've got a song right now with 9 guitar passes, but I have 18 guitar tracks because of that.
Oh.
And I'm just kind of like, I know that when you guys track this, you had something in mind. Just give me what you had in mind, please.
Yeah. I don't have any. I think I would commit, but I'm a little skittish about taking, let's say, 2 aux inputs in Pro Tools and bussing them to one track. That wigs me out. Like the thought of it taking my guitar sound and doing digital to it
I guess I should
weirds me out.
back up and say that I do have
Well, you use
I have
use
this
something.
little API black box that I had made that's 4 inputs, 1 output.
Yeah,
that just
see, well,
passes-
there you go.
I mean, it's active, but
He's Shane knows what he's doing. I don't
no,
have that
I
piece.
just, no, I really don't.
No, he really does.
Shane has the
I've
black
worked.
box.
Yeah, I've worked with Shane quite a bit. He does know what he's doing. I don't have any outboard thing. You know, I bought this Ampex. You know, those big tube mixers with the big.
Yeah.
What was it? A MX-10 or something.
No, what?
And man, I loved it, but I couldn't get it to do. That's what I was going to do with it. I was like, man, I'll put 4 mics on the amp and like make this monster, you know. And yeah, the mixer was not happy with that, so I had to bail on that idea. But I think if somebody needs to make a little 4-input with phase, maybe with a pad, just super simple. And yeah, I'd be all over that.
That is true.
Well, I think Little Labs does. They have like
Oh, do they?
Yeah, that's kind of, you can run a bunch of different inputs into it and combine them together, and it's got like a combining network, and it's also got he's got that phase sort of rotation thing in it, so you can.
Oh,
yeah.
ABP.
I mean, I think there's a few other companies, but the Little Labs is the one I know of for sure. So you can have a bunch of different amps set up and be able to choose between them or combine them together. Man, I was talking about something really interesting. I won't say who it is because he's kind of developing the idea. Maybe I shouldn't even give the idea away.
Oh, come on.
You know, he's developed this arm that has microphones on it and can swing around between the different guitar amps that he has on an arc. So,
Yeah.
and then it's motorized and has a memory, so he can push a button and the arm can go from one amp to the other, and just like that. So he can choose between different guitar amps and pre-set up exactly where the microphone's supposed to
And
be.
he's got a video camera on it, right?
I think he's doing it from control room, but it's a pretty cool idea.
It's a
He's
great
wanting to
idea.
market it.
That's all you're going to find out about that.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have guitar amps that you found maybe that you dug and you end up buying it and maybe asking a guy to use it or using it as an extra amp in your setup or maybe, well, you play guitar, Brent. You know, you obviously have some amps. So, any favorites there or anything that you've, collected over the years?
Where to start for him?
Probably the amp that gets the most use for me is my Matchless 30 watt, the HC30, because I can run it into the Matchless cab in the other room, and it does that, and then I can run it into like my 412 cab, and it's a whole different animal. It's got the 2 channels. I don't use one of them very much. But I find between that Matchless and like the Marshall JMP 50 watts, like early 70s or something, between those 2 amps and like a couple of old Fenders that I, use for this or that, it kind of gets me, through most scrapes.
I don't have much. I just have a few.
You had some instruments for a while, though, didn't you? When you had White House?
Well, I've got quite a few instruments, but I don't have many guitar amps. I mean, I've got a great Jerry Jones 12-string and a hollow body Gibson early 60s bass and an Epiphone hollow body guitar. I mean, I've got just a handful. I work with a lot of young bands, and so many times, if you're a band, you can only afford, each musician can afford one good instrument, so they've got one good guitar. So as far as recording a 12-string or recording an acoustic or whatever, a lot of times they don't have it. So I've tried to have enough instruments to where I can supplement it. I've got a great Taylor acoustic, and I've got a 12-string, and just so we've got enough options when we're recording. But I'm not, it's not something I play myself, so I'm different both than Brent as far as that goes.
I've got, actually, you found it for me, that Univox combo. I still have it. I got rid of, since I'm really not recording as much as I did, I had a whole case full of stuff that was getting used maybe once or twice a year, so I kind of pared down. But I kept that, and my kid now uses it in the basement. But
Nice.
it's this, I haven't actually been able to place the time period for it yet, but anywhere from late 60s to mid 70s, I think. Univox, single 12 combo. I think it's a 15 watt, and
Yeah.
it's a really cool little amp. Like, it doesn't break up amazingly well, but for like a hollow body tone, or even not guitar, but a Wurlitzer plugged into it is probably the coolest whirly tone I've ever recorded. It's just a cool little odd amp.
Well, I don't really own any guitar amps, but work with a lot of people who have some amazing guitar amps, and things that I've seen that have sounded really good over the years have been like Blackface Deluxes and Tweed Bassmans and what is it, Pro Reverb, the Fender Pro Reverb, the Tweed, always like great, and the Matchless seems to be like the happening new amp stuff that I hear.
So let's talk about leakage a little bit. So if you're cutting a guitar player with the rest of the band, Chuck said something interesting when I brought this up earlier, was just turn it up. You know, and I just want to get into different philosophies of, like, do you box the amp, or, you know, throw a blanket over it, or, you know, do you use the leakage as your friend and kind of, you know, work it into the total picture of thing, and how much leakage is okay?
Well, I mean, it used to be that everything was so isolated. With the beginning in the 70s, we started I mean the 80s, we started really isolating everything and making everything so clean and pristine, and I think now we've kind of like gotten to where we're trying to get everything to live together and kind of make everything resonate together. And so I really try and get the guitar player to, if it's a great guitar player or a good guitar player you think it's not going to mess up the track by making a mistake, try and get them to be out in the room with the drums so I can get the bleed from the guitar amp in the room mics. And the only problem with that is that sometimes the snare can kind of just sit there and rattle on the zzz on the guitar. But there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, like, if it's too much guitar, then maybe turn it into the wall, if the wall's absorptive, you know, or put a blanket over it, like you say. That I kind of hate to do that, because then it darkens it and it makes it sort of like muffled in the room. Or ideally, if your room has like a separate booth for the guitar amp, you can have the guitar amp in the booth where you can open the door to the studio to allow for the guitar to bleed into the studio. You can kind of control how much level by how far you have the door open. But one thing you got to, hopefully you try and keep in mind, is like maybe placement of the guitar so that it's relevant to the way the room mics are going to be. So if you want the guitar to be in the left side, you might have it in the left side of the room, so it's there. Otherwise, it kind of sounds like the guitar is like bleeding across the room, which can be cool too, I guess.
We had a couple Twitter questions, actually. Brian Stevens wants to know, he wants you guys to name one of your moped guitar tools. And he says, for example, the thing you love to ride but are embarrassed to tell anybody about. Shane has a Vespa, so maybe we should start
I'm a
with...
scooter rider, and I take offense to that question.
Well, just like, for instance, some kind of maybe inexpensive tool, or, you know, something, mic or something, or I like to, you know, like stick it in my Jeep, or that kind of, you know.
I've got this little DPA clip-on mic that I like for, like, when you're having to record a vocalist and playing an acoustic guitar at the same time. It just clips onto the guitar, and it's got a little gooseneck on it, and it's a super hypercardioid microphone, and it's somehow, I mean, it actually sounds really good in and of itself, but it kind of rolled out a little bit on the bottom so you don't get so much boom, but it's really works great to get like that the real acoustic guitar sound with, while you've got a vocalist singing at the same time. Works better than like stuffing a mic actually inside the guitar. It's really boomy.
I love the DBX 160X compressors still that you can still pick up for $150 a piece. That I'm not afraid and not ashamed to use one of those on a guitar anytime. Unless you don't like it, and then I take it all back.
I've got one of those Michael Wagner MW1 boxes, which is really cool and gives a lot of flexibility when you're recording guitars. One of the things I love about it is you can insert your pro audio gear between the guitar and the amp. So if I'm wanting to EQ the guitar, instead of running it through a EQ stop box, I can put my GML EQ between the guitar and the amp, or I can put an 1176 between the guitar and the amp. And there's just a lot of flexibility in inserting pro gear, using that gear also for guitar tones. And
That sounds really inexpensive. Thank you, Russ.
it's not inexpensive, sorry.
What do those GMLs go for?
They're $42, I think. I misunderstood the Twitter question. I'm still trying to get a grasp on the whole Twitter thing.
I have two that I can think of. First is that Cascade mic that's $200. I never tell people what it costs, when we're like using it. I just put it on their amp and push the fader up. I don't tell them it's a $200 mic. But man, I love to cheat. Any way I can cheat to get a better sound or a better part or a better anything, I'll do it. And sometimes if I'm working with like a band guitar player and they're like maybe playing octaves or something like that, but they can't, it's like they're not that accurate and their fingers aren't totally dialed in.
You're working with a bad band, is what you're saying?
I mean, yeah, sometimes, but I take earplugs and I squash them and I put them under the strings that they're not playing. So if they're only playing like the A string and the G string and they're doing some kind of octave thing, then I'll just put all kinds of crap on the other strings to where they just can't ring. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how accurate they are. So, I mean, I'll take strings off the guitar sometimes. Seriously, it's like, hey, anything goes. I don't care what, it's like if I hit play and I go, that's awesome, I don't care really what it took to get there,
Russ, that's what they meant by the question, by the way.
What's that?
That's what they meant by the question, what he just said.
Oh, so more of the
Just
price
to
of
clarify,
earplugs.
yeah.
Walgreens,
Price Club, yeah.
great gear store.
We got a question about, is it possible to get a distorted tone from a clean direct guitar signal, and if there's a plug-in you would go to? And then we actually have another question that talks about reamping, so we can probably put those into one question. Is there a plug-in, or do you reamp, or you just recut, or what do you guys do? If you've got a clean direct guitar signal, let's say it comes to you to mix or something like that, and they just put it down, or if you record.
I use that MW1 to reamp as well, but it costs a lot more than a pair of earplugs. But no, it works the same way. You can run a signal into it, and it dumbs it down to the right impedance and level to go right into an amp, and makes it real easy to record it again and distort it a little more. And I generally prefer that more than using a plug-in to create distortion.
I mean, I've got some reamp boxes too. They're basically a transformer and a pad. You can buy. Shure makes little like inline pads and transformers that take it to a 1/4-inch jack that you can simply go through to get back to an amp and reamp with. And I haven't really heard a really great plug-in that sounds like an amp. Waves has something that's pretty good, but it's it never really sounds. The main problem though with direct signals is an amp reacts to the level that you're feeding it, how it distorts, and the way you distort the amp is by how hard you're hitting it, how hard you're driving it, and that's all a matter of feel. So it's kind of hard to reamp even a guy who's played through an amp and run it through a more distorted sound or something and really get the desired effect, because it's how you play the thing. I think part of what we've not spoke about yet today is, you know, to get a great guitar tone starts with a great guitar player, and how they play the instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's pretty hard otherwise. You can use tricks and you can take a lot of time and comp together tons of guitar passes, and you can make something that's good. But I mean, to get that great guitar sound, somebody asked me, how do you get that Knopfler tone? You know, if you had his fingers, you could get that tone.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, great guitar sounds start with great fingers. I find also that a great song makes a decent guitar part a lot better. I mean, if you got a great song, it's like nobody's sitting there going, what about that guitar sound? You know, they're just listening to that song. It's hitting them. I'll throw this out there, too. I don't think you can get good tone with anything less than 11s on your guitar. But that's my personal thing. I think you have to have it. I mean, 10s, yeah, you know, maybe. But,
Oh, I thought you meant turn the knob to 11.
oh, no. No, I mean, I'll plug this, too. I think Diodario strings are the best. But I think, I mean, gosh, I think you gotta have great fingers, but then you gotta have some metal on there vibrating, you know, and like something like 9s, it's just not enough metal vibrating to give you great tone. But you know, I don't want people throwing stuff at me either. But I mean, I'll take a band, and if they come in and they play 9s or something, I'll just, you know, either ratchet them up to 10s or go all the way to 11s, or put one of my guitars in their hand that has 11s or 12s on it or something like that. I'm not a real bendy player either. You know, I'm not like Stevie Ray Vaughan or something where he could bend those things. I don't bend a lot, so I know that comes into play, but that's really what allows me to play huge, like 11s and 12s, because I think if I bent them all the time, I probably wouldn't be so into it, you know.
So,
You know what, though? Actually,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I will step in, though, since the original question was about plugins and stuff, if I have to, and it does come up and it does happen. I'm really digging, we were just talking about it back here, actually, the Sound Toys Decapitator plugin, which isn't an amp simulator, but it really is some cool overdrive. And then Massey's he's got an overdrive, which is a tape simulator, which is a cool kind of warmish overdrive thing. And then his fuzz box, I can't think of what it's called, but DT?
No, it's THD?
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, it's pretty cool,
The
too.
one that's real over the top?
Yeah.
Yeah, THD.
If I have to, you know, and I know sometimes we have to, and, you know, people are in situations where that needs to happen, so.
Do you guys know, you guys mix? I don't mix. These three guys mix. I'm not really a mix engineer. But do you guys ever get a guitar sound in and you push everything up and you go, man, it's just not, it just doesn't have enough muscle, and like run it, I mean, let's say they didn't give you any DI, then how do you put more muscle on a guitar sound that didn't come in with a DI?
I try to start with EQ, but if it gets into needing some stuff on top of that, I'll just start with anything I have that'll overdrive, and a lot of times it just doesn't work. For me personally, you know, it sounds like I'm trying to screw something up.
I mean, I'll use like a parallel path and overdrive the parallel path and bleed that into the original and give it some more muscle. And I'll use a plug-in. The Waves plug-in works pretty good for that sort of thing, you know, just to kind of like add a bit more sort of jizz to something.
You said
But
jizz.
it's whoops.
Which plug-in would that be?
I think it's called GTR, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, there's one innuendo for all you innuendo users. There's one that comes along with the program that's not bad, and I don't know. Most of them aren't any good though that I've tried.
I mean, you know, sometimes you're just in a situation
Yeah.
where you need to try to make
But
something
you
happen,
can can still take an amped guitar and reamp it and bring that
Yeah.
back in and just kind of add a bit of that in there. It's kind of cool.
That's what,
Usually-
I've had to do that a couple times.
Yeah.
I usually find that, for my ear, something kind of odd happens with the real amp distortion on top of the real amp distortion thing that kind of sneaking in a plug-in. For me personally, I feel like I have a little bit more control to try and get there. It's not ideal. I mean, I'll say that saying it's not ideal to have to do that in the
Yeah.
first place.
I've used my Sans amp a few times for that.
I
The
have
old
yeah,
rack mount with the knobs
Yeah.
with no memory.
I have to.
What's that Digi plug-in? It's you can actually change the like the aliasing filter and all that.
Oh,
sort of-
lo-fi?
Lo-fi.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's an interesting plug-in for like messing up something, you know.
I love that.
Yeah,
I use it more
great.
for percussion than anything else.
Yeah.
Sometimes tambourine comes in and it's so bright and brittle and takes your head off, and you put that on there and you can still put it up in the mix and it doesn't cut into you.
I remember, you guys know Reed Shippen, he's been on some panels. He used to work at Soundstage a lot, and he used to say, man, I get these tracks and they all sound so terrible. He said, they're all distorted. He said, the only thing I can do is just distort them more. He said, you're so lucky, all the stuff you get sounds good.
So in a situation, Chuck talked about the DPA mic, and I think that you use that with Mark a lot, right? Because he likes to sing and play at the same time.
Using the little DPA mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, do that, generally I'll use that with like a bidirectional microphone, put like a U67 on bidirectional, so it's, you know, the side of the mic then is where the most rejection is, and more so than a cardioid mic, because the figure 8 pattern really rejects the sides, so so if you put the, you know, a multi-pattern microphone on bidirectional, you'll get probably the best rejection that you can. And then sometimes take a DI of the acoustic too and kind of blend a bit of that in. And then generally it's just kind of a mix battle, you know. I mean, where he's singing, you're kind of yanking down the further mic, you know, and using more of the DI or the little DPA mic or a mic that you may have stuffed inside the guitar. And so it's kind of a riding thing when the guitar then becomes more predominant or matters more, than you use more of the outside mic.
How about you other guys in the situation where you have a singer who, you know, absolutely has to sing when they play to get the vibe? You don't want to break it off into an overdub situation. How do you guys deal with that?
I do the figure 8 thing
Yeah,
as well.
well, that's I
the
mean, with him,
perfect-
you just got to. And then the other thing to do is like put a compressor so that the you know, where the two compressors, the one that's on the vocal and the one that's on the guitar, are linked. So you want the guitar to be knocking down with the vocal too, so it's knocking down the leakage. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
I do the same thing, but a lot of times I'll use a second mic on the guitar, and I'll put a piece of foam over the top of it so it doesn't pick up the vocal, and it'll only pick up the guitar, to try to be a guitar-only mic. And then, although I love that DPA mic sounds great, I've seen that before. I never thought about that use, but I don't think there's a clear, easy way to do it, though. It's always a challenge, and a lot of it depends on how much the person moves their head when they sing, and how dynamic they sing, and how loud they sing, and I mean, a lot of different things matter. So, and how dynamic they play as well. So, for me, it almost always ends up being a little bit of experimentation before you get it nailed. And I don't know if you ever get it nailed exactly, because it seems like there's always a little. Like Chuck said, there's always a little of that in the mix. You're always dealing with issues in different parts of the song.
Well, if they can't do one or the other, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
If they can't sing or they can't play, I mean, if either one is faulty, you're hosed.
Well, then you
know,
got
it's
to take
kind
them
of-
separately.
What's that?
Then you got to take the parts.
Then you got
separate.
it right. I mean, you
Figure a
you
way.
can't do them at the same time. But I always take my vocal mic and I you know. I just go up a little bit, and then I take my acoustic mic and just point it down a little bit. And find that kind of
I got
gets
this
me more.
this little shield that's actually meant for a snare drum. Prime Acoustic makes it that is meant to reject hi-hat for the snare
Crash
drum.
guard, right?
Huh?
The crash guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I haven't tried it yet, but I just got one. I'm waiting to have a vocal guitar player to try it on.
I know, like David Leonard, when he did the Indigo Girls years ago, built this huge contraption, and it was like, you know, it was a big piece of foam and wood and stuff, and like they were playing guitar, and then there was this big
Nice.
separation business going on, and then, you know, and he was like, no, man, you can't hear guitar in the vocal mic and all. So I
I'm
guess
sure the guitar player really felt comfortable. too.
yeah, right. I know. I mean, but I guess it worked for them. I mean, in an extreme case.
Yeah.
I think you go into that knowing the limitations, though, and you kind of, you accept tone. It's defined a little bit differently that, because, I mean, sometimes, the performance, what happens in the moment is way more important than how it ultimately sounds necessarily. So if you're going into that situation where you do know that you have an artist who prefers to play and sing at the same time, and it is their thing, and they do it well, you go into it knowing that you have now set a sort of a different bar, not necessarily a lower bar or anything like that, but your expectations are somewhat different for what you're going to get on the back end, and you just hope that the artistry, speaks louder than some of the odd technical stuff that might go along with.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sets the sound. It is kind of like an image also. I mean, we've heard Bob Dylan ever since I was little, and that's kind of singer-songwriter sound,
Right.
I mean, and so when you've got a guy playing or a girl playing and singing at the same time, that creates an image, and it's a good image.
And
I
that
think,
being said, some of the best success I've had is when you're talking about redefining the standard, is to approach it as, well, why don't we try this, which is one mic. Instead of miking the vocal and the acoustic, how about we pull the mic back and we actually get a performance, and this is the sound, and that especially if you're in a recording space that's cool to begin with.
I did
Problem
that on
solved.
a song with Mark, and it's one of the best sounding. I had a couple of room mics in the room, and the one U48 just out a little distance from the vocal and guitar, and it's just the best sound. It's just like, and it was just vocal guitar with those room mics. It's just huge sounding, What I always do is like take multiple takes of guitar and vocal, and then when I'm comping the vocal, I'll get Mark, let's say, to play a guitar pass where he doesn't sing, so I have that clean pass to comp vocal to. But once I've got the vocal comp done, then I go back through and comp the acoustic to match the vocal comp. And then you can kind of slide here and there. If the guitar part wasn't perfect, you've got the clean part. You can kind of slide in there to fix it,
How about acoustic guitar? Any special considerations there? You guys like a special setup, stereo, XY, spaced pair? How does that go for you guys?
I'm a big KM84 fan. I don't know if you guys, I mean, you guys probably record more acoustic than I do. But
For me, it just depends on the situation, But I mean,
depends on the guitar for sure.
well, and
I
it
can't
goes
put a
without saying
KM84
that
on a
great
Taylor.
guitar, a great acoustic, like almost even more than electric and amp combo.
Yeah.
If you've just got a kick-ass acoustic guitar, it almost doesn't matter what you're going to put in front of it, as long as you can capture the character of that guitar.
I use a 57 a lot on my, I have an old J45.
I love a 57 on a J45.
Man, the 57 just, I don't know.
In a rock track, especially.
In a rock track, yeah. But it gives it that, I don't know, it just gives it that mid-range thing that it's looking for. most of the time.
The KM84 is one of my favorites, or the newer version, the 184 is a cheaper and quieter version that sounds really good. I really like the DPA 4011s. It's an expensive mic, but a really natural sounding small diaphragm condenser mic, and easy to sort of set up XYs. Or if you're going to do XYs, the small diaphragm microphone works better a little bit. But like a U67 just in front of a J45, man, you can't hardly beat that. It's just,
You can't beat a U67
Yeah.
on anything.
I mean, I use a Sony C800G a lot on guitar and love that, and I almost always record mono, unless if the guitar is the backbone of the song, then I'll capture it in stereo. But if it's a secondary part, I almost always record it mono, just because it can tend to take up too much space otherwise. And I've got a C28 small diaphragm tube mic that I love on acoustics as well. And if somebody's digging in, I really like the sound of that. Generally, I use the Earthworks SR77 a lot if it's a finger picking part or something real soft. And I've got a KM86, which has the same capsule as the KM84 that I use a lot as well.
Affordable mics that can often work. The Rode NT5, I've found, can actually work pretty well. The thing that makes it different from some of the other less expensive mics made abroad, shall we say, is that it doesn't have that upper mid spike that a lot of cheap condenser mics have these days. It actually starts rolling the top end off kind of gently around like 5K or something. And if you're looking for a bit more mellow tone for a small condenser, that works really well. And then the Shure SM81 has worked for me more than once as well, which is not as expensive as your toys.
Mm-hmm.
well, I got the Shure 141, I think, is the multi-pattern small diaphragm mic. I love that on acoustic, and it's a great sounding mic. Sometimes I'll add like a Royer ribbon or a Coles in with the condenser to kind of get a nice warm sound. And
Yeah, when I do record stereo, I almost always put a Royer on the body,
yeah,
and I love that.
yeah, it's a nice, gives you that wood, and I generally,
Nothing gets past Shane. Nothing.
Sorry. You've now officially witnessed the last panel that I'll ever be on with Chuck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can I buy you a drink?
yes,
All right.
tequila.
Do you guys feel like, I think when I record acoustic guitar players, again, I mean, they're artists, right? So they're out on the road, so they have these kind of workhorse road guitars, which are great for the road. Like, I think a Taylor is a fantastic workhorse, night after night kind of guitar. But I haven't run into a whole lot of Taylors that I really care to record. I mean, and I'm not knocking them, please. They're so well made. And what comes out of the jack is often really good for a PA for most applications. But I find a lot of artists they don't think outside of that box very much. They've kind of got their Taylor and that's it. And then I think another box they don't think out of a lot is strings. They don't ever think flat wounds. They don't ever think half wounds. They don't ever think, anything trippy like that. I mean, if you've got kind of a song that has like an old-timey vibe or something, man, throw some flats on there. Throw some flats on your electric. Throw some flats on your hollow body. And it's just a whole different palette. It's like when you strum that, it's a whole different inspiration and everything. And, I know for years I was so stuck in round wound world. And, they have their place. I mean, it's what I use most of the time. But I'm always telling guitar players, man, go to the music store and just, what are they? They're like $10 a set, So spend $50 on some weird strings and see what you get out of it. Try it out. Flats on an old I mean, gosh, you can get on Craigslist and you can buy an old Gibson, what are they, LG3 or what's the model number? You know, those old
LG3,
L series
yeah.
Gibson. I mean, you can get one for like $500 to $750, something like that, from the 1950s and stuff. And gosh, you can just go to pawn shops and pick up $300 acoustics here and there, and you just never know what you're going to get. Throw flats on that one, throw rounds on this one, and you know, I would say part of my advice would be divorce yourself from the notion that a more expensive guitar is a better guitar or a better sounding guitar, because it's not always true. Because, you know, the old Gibson that you bought on Craigslist for $750, it might not sound as glassy and as great as, like, say, your Larrivee or something like that, which, again, are fantastic guitars. But for a different spin, I mean, for a certain song, you might pick up that Gibson and it might just speak the same language as the song, whereas, like, the Larrivee is kind of speaking that song with an accent, if that makes any sense.
I think what he's saying is, like, you just can't pile a bunch of bright on top of a bunch of bright, you know.
Yeah.
You got, and when you're making a record, part of what the sounds have to be warm sounds, and so, you know, a nice warmer acoustic guitar sometimes will fill that space better than just, like, trying to power through with a bunch of bright, you know. So I think that's the whole reason we're seeing ribbons come back, where everybody's trying to find ways to put warmth into digital recordings or MP3s. Let's face it, they sound like doo-doo. I can say doo-doo. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, the part of the way you make those warmer sounds is not always chasing after bright.
I like to change up something. If I'm stacking an acoustic guitar part of it, if they want to do two passes, I'll either switch mics or have them switch guitars, or switch something up on every one too, so I don't have two identical passes. I'll have a warmer sound or a rounder sound, or maybe I'll use just a ribbon on a pass for second pass or whatever. But I think that those sounds will complement themselves better and a lot easier to fit into a mix down the road too.
We got a question over here. Yeah.
I was wondering, it's cool to hear some good different mic ideas, and I put a pretty good chunk of money for my small studio into a console, so I have like 64 great AMEC pre's, and I was just kind of wondering if any of you guys had a quick sort of knee-jerk reaction if I was going to ask what would be a good outboard pre that might give me some flexibility and color that's not going to break the bank, especially for guitars.
Acoustic or electric?
Either. I mean, I like the AMEX a lot for the acoustic. I mean, they're fine. They're just all the same, you know.
On electric, I mean, API, you know, I mean, they're not real expensive, and I really don't think you can beat it as far, and it's just a straight-ahead preamp with phase shift, and that's it, you know. I mean, it's pad. Yeah. I mean, it's a great electric guitar pre.
And, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the 500 series format that I find is great on electric guitar, you know.
Yeah, was there a Mix article or something that had something about,
Ooh, nice time.
was it Mix?
Yeah, we did a roundup. There was a ton of companies that had 500 series stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
getting bigger as it goes along.
Yeah, but the API, I've had some good luck with the Purple Biz pre, which is
I love my Shadow Hills.
the Shadow Hills.
I
the
can't get away
mono
from my
gamma.
Shadow Hills. I mean,
That's not cheap, is it, or inexpensive?
well, I think they're, what are they, Shane?
I don't know. Find somebody desperate enough to sell it. You might. Yeah. I'm not sure what they go for. But
I think they're $700 or $800 for a, you know, for a little box, and then you have to buy a little chassis thing, which I think you could probably find for what, $300. I mean, you could probably get in and out of it for $1,000, which I don't know if that's, you know, if that's super cheap. You know what I heard though? Somebody told me that Black Lion pre is really good, and
I haven't heard it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The
The guys.
Oh,
that
they do a mod.
yeah, the Black Line guys who do those mods to Digi stuff, they make a mic pre, and somebody said it was fantastic. It's just gain, I think. There's no EQ, there's no way you can mess it up or anything. But that's totally on hearsay.
There's some good do-it-yourself stuff, too, where you can buy the components and even
Yeah.
pick your transformers, like between a Lundahl or a Souder or whatever, and you can kind of experiment that way. And you can save a lot of money just buying the kit from the company, and they just ship you parts. And then you, with detailed instructions, some of it's actually on YouTube, so you can see how they put it together. Seventh Circle audio.
Yeah, I've got one of the 1073 copies from Seventh Circle, and it's killer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great stuff.
So you can save some money there and then, upgrade your rig without having to break the bank in that
Or you
sense,
can
so.
spend more money like me, because you build it, and then you have to pay somebody to make it work. But it sounds great.
Any more questions? Anybody? No? Go ahead.
Any experience whatsoever using, this is one example I've seen. Egnator has a head that has a silent record out. I know other companies have done it before, so if you're in a situation where you don't have a lot of isolation, or say you have a neighbor, you can go direct into Pro Tools from their, just a direct line out from that head. Just wondering if anybody had any experience using those versus plugins versus other options.
I think you're better off buying one of those, like James Demeter makes an isolation box that lets you, it still has a speaker that moves. You can put a mic inside, it's extremely quiet, and you still have capture the movement of a speaker through a mic, and to me that sounds better than any of those direct signals I've ever heard.
Does the direct thing, is it supposed to sound like a mic on a speaker?
Correct.
Like it sort of emulates a speaker?
It's got, it has a dummy speaker load.
Okay.
On the output tube, so.
But does it have an EQ curve sort of that?
Yeah, it has a
Gets in
speaker
there.
emulation thing.
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen.
I haven't heard that, but I've heard those Palmer boxes. Have you ever heard those Palmer? There's this company called Palmer, and they make these speaker emulation boxes. And a friend of mine had one, and he freaked me out with it pretty bad because he plugged his amp straight in, and it was like, golly, that sounds really good, and it sounds like it's on a speaker. I don't know. I would tend to go straight out of there into something and like maybe play a scratch track, something you're going to replace later when the neighbors are out of town or something. And
Doesn't Marshall and some different companies make things that you can plug in that will really load down the amp, so you at a lower volume you can get sort of the same sound as if you crank the amp.
Yeah, I've recorded through some of those, where
And-
it still comes out of a speaker and everything,
Yeah.
but it,
yeah, THD
yeah, those
hot
things-
plate.
Yeah, hot plate's one of them. There's
Yeah.
a number of them, and you can get some pretty decent sounds at a low volume that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used the hot plate a lot, and I love it, but I
Yeah.
haven't used the other ones. I know some real purist guys are kind of snobby about that, right?
Well, yeah, but if you
Like
can't
it's,
crank, if you can't go to 11,
Right.
that's better than
At
direct.
least you still get the speaker movement, which I think is a big
Yeah.
part.
I mean, and part of with the speakers, the distance from the speaker to the mic and the off-axisness of the mic, and just the sort of the phase cancellations off the floor, all that sort of stuff. That's what makes it sound like it does.
We got a Twitter question here. Do you guys use any compression like 1176 or a distressor on electric guitar, and what about a compressor on an acoustic guitar? As a rule, or maybe in a specialized situation like we were talking about earlier?
As a rule, I try not to compress electric guitars because to me it sort of really takes away from what the guitar players feel about what they're doing and how they attack the guitar. Acoustic guitar, I'll go, depending on what it is, if you're wanting that kind of real slamming kind of guitar sound, then I'll go real heavy on compression on acoustic guitar. So, but generally for me, electric guitar, when you compress it, it just takes away the dynamics. It's already compressed if it's distorted because of the amp overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I do love the purple MC77 for electric guitar.
I think you just like purple.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? Are there any representatives here today? No? Okay. No, I do like the purple MC77 though. I mean, I love a vintage blackface Revision D 1176, but in terms of modern things that have been reissued, the MC77 does it for me. I've never been a big Distressor fan personally, but
I've had some success with Distressor on acoustic in a rock track, you know, where I wasn't slamming it. I mean, Distressors are great, but I'm with you.
I
You
just
know,
think my clients recording for themselves,
a Distressor's
they're a
girl,
little bit like crack
yeah.
for the home
A
recorders.
Distressor is a girl that you date every now and then. You don't marry her. That's my opinion.
I use distressors, electric guitars. Sorry. And I use a CL1B usually on acoustic.
And Russ has good taste in women.
And
so.
distressor on electrics. And as long as you don't go too extreme, I think it sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right?
I think
mean,
mine
just
is a
don't-
knee-jerk reaction from all the sort of home recorded stuff that I got. That's what everybody bought at the same time for some reason.
Yeah.
I just went to stun on it.
I have this box that I bought so long ago. It's an old Gates stay level, and it's an old tube compressor, and that on a clean guitar is just, it's great. Like all my notes, instead of going Dynacomp on the front end, you know, which I would tend to do sometimes to really make my notes speak,